Okay, just a quick synopsis. Relative max is the highest point in its vicinity. Relative min is the lowest point in its vicinity. And a relative extremum is a relative max or relative min, right? Okay? So now we've got a graph here, and I say the window of the graph goes from negative A to B and from negative C to D. And actually I should not have drawn the axes on this because that would probably be inconsistent with these numbers.
What will we put for D?
Oh, sorry. Should have been A or B or C. Okay, could be anything. But it'll be A's, B's, and C's, and you have your own numbers for those. Okay? So what do we mean by the window of the graph? Here's the window of the graph. It goes from, let's say the graph comes down to here. Okay? Now here's the lower left-hand corner of the window. And of course the window has to go high enough to contain all the points. So the graph has to go high enough to be here. It has to encompass everything from left to right. It has to be low enough here. That's the window. Does that make sense? It's the smallest square. It's the smallest rectangle. It encloses the graph. So now, let's see, for me, those would be the inequalities, right? So what are the coordinates of this point? For my numbers. I'm going to ask you to do it for your numbers in a minute.
Would it be -5, -6?
Yeah. Because x goes from -5 to 4. Well, x goes over here to here, right? You could even say that this line here is the line x equals -5, right? This is the line x equals 4. Okay? I'm not going to put that on there because I want to put a scale on here, but this point at least would be x equals -5 and y equals -6. It's the lowest y value and the leftmost x value, right? And then this point here must be 4, 5, right? So this point is 4, 5, and now we can draw a scale. Okay, x goes from -5 here to 4 here. So where's the y-axis going to be? It'll be pretty close to halfway between negative. If it's -5 and -5, it'd be in the middle, right? But it's -5, -4. Does that put the y-axis to the left or right of the middle?
Left.
Okay, because, well, actually it's going to be to the right because you need more y-axis on the left than you got on the right. But getting hit in the eye, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got an excuse.
That was -4.
Yeah, so actually I accidentally put it right about where it might ought to be. Okay? And then y goes from -6 to 5. There's more y below the axis than above, so I didn't have the y-axis quite where it should be. So my y-axis would end up going about here, right? And again, we see we have -5 here. We have 4 here. And on the y-axis, we have -6 and 5. So according to my window, what's the relative, give me the, well, first of all, can you identify a relative max? I'm going to trace this curve slowly, and as soon as I hit a relative max, which is what? It's a point that's higher than any point near it, right? You can probably spot that right away. But you tell me, say stop when I hit a relative max, right? I'll go slowly. You ready? Nobody else. Okay, I'll be even slower. Okay.
Stop.
There it is, right? So here's your relative max. And everybody, I think, sees that there's another relative max here. And there's a relative min. See if I can find a different color. Okay? At this point, what are the coordinates of the relative max and the relative min? Can you estimate them from the scale? I mean, what's the x-coordinate here look like? Well, it's about here.
About half between -5.
It's about halfway between 0 and -5, but probably a little closer to -5. So we're just going to be sloppy and say, well, maybe that's just -3. Probably a little to the right of -3, but not an unreasonable estimate. And if this is 5 here, this is maybe between 1 and 2. We'll just say -3, 2, just to do whole numbers. You can do decimals, whatever. Okay? But that would be a reasonable estimate. And the relative max would be what? It looks like it's about, well, it's more than 1, less than 2. I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to say the relative max here is 1.5, 4.7. You might have a different opinion. You're probably more likely to be right. And the relative min would be at maybe -2, -0.4. We don't need to belabor the estimates. You probably can't even read that. The chalk kind of got turned. And I don't know how to write. Okay? Understand the process? Take just a minute and slop down a graph that looks kind of like that and make your own estimates based on your values of A, B, and C.